The JLR interview series.
Okay, so it's Friday afternoon, 7th of December 2018, and doing a Skype interview today. And today we've got a singer and I would say artist as well. Her name's Miriam Aziz and she's based in Milan. So how are you this afternoon?
I'm very well. We actually have a public holiday today.
Oh, do you?
In Milan, well, only in Milan, so it's a long weekend, so I'm enjoying some time off.
Only in Milan?
Yes, it's the feast of Sant'Ambrogio, and it's the saint of Milan, so we all have long weekends, so it's a really nice time to relax before the Christmas rush.
Yeah, no, that sounds really nice. It's interesting because over here, obviously, we don't have regional public holidays so you're saying like people are actually off work?
Yeah, so most Milanese people go away for the long weekend,
right,
and just have a bit of a mini holiday before the Christmas rush sets in, and traditionally people start to buy the Christmas trees around now.
Yeah.
And so I went for a walk this morning and saw people were already starting to buy their Christmas decorations. It's quite a festive moment. It's really quite beautiful.
Okay, but that's good. Okay, so yeah, we got Miriam on today because I featured one of the tracks of hers. She brought out a new EP recently, and the track I played was called Unsubscribe, which is a unique title in itself. Now, so, you know, the first thing I want to ask you about is the EP. So first of all, can you tell the listeners what the EP is called, please?
So the EP is called I Am Here Where I Am Home.
Mm-hmm.
And it was released by 33 Jazz Records, and distributed by The Orchard, who also very kindly distributed the video. So I made a short film for the last track, the track that you actually played, called Unsubscribe, bracket Please Remove Me. So if you look for it on Google, unfortunately you mostly get messages about how to unsubscribe from websites. So but I don't know, it's quite. Self-irony is always a very healthy thing to have. So this is my fifth studio album, and when I actually started it, I thought this is it. This will be my last. So I wanted to make it short but brief.
Oh, right.
But then I thought while I was doing it, I thought, well, you should never really censor yourself in that way. I think you should just allow things to happen. So I thought I was just having such fun while I was recording it. I thought, well, don't sort of limit your options right now. So,
well, why you know? I mean, I sound like this less of a music interview and more of a sports interview. Why you decide to retire and making this your last record?
I think this is the last studio album. It's not the same thing as retiring. That's not what I meant.
Yeah, no.
Well, I think that I had a couple of very lucid conversations with other musicians and owners of record companies and recording studios, and generally the musical community is obviously what we're feeling the challenges that are posed by certainly streaming services, and just the whole landscape has changed, and there are many good things about that, I think, and personally. My musical career has really benefited from the way that the goalposts have shifted away from the major record companies. But I also noted that musicians certainly, those who are not lucky enough to be in the sort of top 1%, it's a very tough life to lead.
Yeah.
And so there's this just collective moment of reflection, and in a way that's actually why I think the album happened, because I was sort of thinking about all this, and obviously the best way to think as a musician is just get into a studio or just get to the piano and start playing. I think that's the way you engage with the world, certainly the way I engage with the world. So, and I heard there was something else in what I was doing, and I just sort of simplified everything and pared everything down to very sort of basic ideas, and each song was sort of like a structured improvisation, which I'd never really done before on my own.
Right.
I've done that with other projects, certainly live performances, but I didn't want to have a set idea of what I was trying to say, so I thought, well, try and see what happens. And I think probably it's a reflection of just the current climate for musicians is that we're not really sure how things are going to go. I mean, it's on one hand people are very depressed and sort of feeling the pinch, and certainly independent artists and the artists who try to do something which is maybe less mainstream are really sort of sensing that the challenges are getting bigger and bigger, and they're just diversifying. But at the same time, I think that can be a very fertile moment for you to challenge your creativity.
Right.
So it's never really a zero-sum game. I mean, there's always benefits and burdens, I think. And so really, the album came from this moment of reflection. Also, what does it mean? I mean, there are 4 tracks on the album. The first one is called Infinity. The second track is called Authenticity. The third track is called Privacy, and the fourth track is called Unsubscribe. I mean, these are the sort of 4 themes that I was coming back to over and over again, and just thinking about what does it mean to be authentic, and how can you also, musically speaking, try to break out of your habits, break out of your way of second guessing, the way that you compose and the way that you perform, and really make it something that's somehow resonates with how you're feeling at that time.
Right.
Notwithstanding the intention of wanting to entertain as well. I mean, you sort of want to share your own voice, but you also want to maybe open that voice up to make it more accessible to other people and try to engage them in a way that's more part of a dialogue. I think that's one thing about music, is that something that makes sense to you in a certain way doesn't necessarily make sense to somebody else.
Right. So
differently. So.
Yeah. So I mean that's so how would I put it? So the concept of the EP is that there's no concept. Would that be? Am I getting that? Because I was going to ask you if there was a particular concept.
Well, I think what I sort of gravitated towards was this concept of home. Not because not by choice. It's just I was just constantly asked. I've been constantly asked, where am I from? Where do I belong? What does it mean to belong? And as you said, I'm a British artist. I chose to live in Italy. I'm based in Milan.
Right.
I've travelled a lot as part of my own artistic career and also career as a lawyer. So I've lived in great many different places, and it's just very interesting because I sort of got to this point where I thought, well, wouldn't it be lovely to be able to sort of having to answer this question over and over again, just being able to point somebody to the EP and say, well, it's all there. If you want to have a listen, and that's where I'm from. Because for me, music and movement are they're very linked to a place that is really part of my core self. And I go back to that place to create, to engage, to think, to reflect, and to feel. So that was really the idea. And sort of the title, I'm here where I'm home, it's really a feeling, a sense of, it can be a place, a person, food, and it can be so many different things. And I love the fact that it can be so many different things, where you somehow intuitively feel I'm home. And so I think that the album grew from that, but I wasn't that conscious of that, and I really didn't want to approach this in a very cerebral way. And the album before this was called Lost for Words, which was a soundtrack for an artistic installation that I created in New York, and that really was a sort of concept album about how to engage with testimony beyond text, beyond words, and it was a sort of law, humanities and art project. And so that was really, that had a specific research agenda, and I spent a lot of years funding it through scholarships and grants and so on through various law schools. And so that was, I'd come away from that very, very cerebral approach to music and to composition, to want to do something a bit more spontaneous. Albeit as part of a moment of reflection. I think that this came from another place, really.
Okay, that's interesting, because this is one of the things I was going to mention as well, because so it's 4 tracks, and I mean, I would describe the music as quite abstract.
Right.
Well, I mean, I don't know how there's a lot of space, and it's avant-garde is not the right word. I don't think that's the right word, but there's definitely actually almost like a creation, like a painting almost, or something like that. I mean, how would you describe that, what you've done?
It's that's really interesting. I never thought of it that way. To see it as a painting. I mean, I think that probably makes sense in one sense, because I recorded the 4 tracks at different times over a period of 2 years, and so I allowed things to somehow mature and somehow to find their way together. And so yes, I mean, it is abstract. Probably I can see what you mean. Although I didn't really intend it to be as abstract, but I definitely I see what you mean, because I think I sort of was aware that I didn't want to have to subtitle everything I was doing. And I think that there is a certain space in some of the pieces which take you in different directions.
Yeah, definitely.
And I actually did. That was really funny, because I didn't really plan it. And I would go to the recording studio and I wouldn't know what I was going to do, and I would just sit down at the piano, and that's really where the start of the piano for this project. And I would just start playing, and it was really funny, because sometimes while I was warming up, the recording engineer would just start recording without me knowing. And in fact, we used some of those segments in the EP, and I thought it was really funny, because I thought, well, it's funny, you're trying to find that sort of authentic place of playing. It's almost like you're creating without paying attention.
Right.
I think that's somehow that transcendental moment that you really look for. It's just that it somehow flows without you overthinking it.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, the other thing I would say is, just from my perspective, I think it's classic European jazz, because there's so much stuff that comes out of Europe, and I know I'm kind of putting it the continent as a whole here, which I shouldn't, but I think you'll understand what I'm trying to say. Music that comes out of this continent is so different from American jazz. It's not blues based. There's different elements comes into it, whether it be folk or other elements. And I think this is a good example of that. Almost like the ECM sound, which I'm sure the listeners will understand immediately what I mean by that.
That's a huge compliment, I have to say.
Oh, okay.
I'm a huge fan of ECM, as a lot of the artists that they have on their roster, and that's a huge compliment. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome.
I can see what you mean. I'm sort of loath to cluster musicians into sort of different types of schools. But although I think fair enough, and I think that I'm not sort of saying that to be sort of witty or anything provocative, but so I never think of it in that way, really. And I think I have a very instinctive approach to music, and I've always had this sense of just listening out things that somehow hook me, and I don't tend to sort of somehow stay in that mode for very long. I mean, I listen to all sorts of music.
Sure.
And I'm not mean, but fair enough. I do think that record companies have a certain texture that they look for, a certain style. So, for example, as you say, the ECM catalogue, it's probably very difficult to put it into words, but I can see what you mean. I think that you can pick out an ECM artist if you're in a record shop, and I still go to those. You overhear music and think, well, who is that? You can tend to know that it's an ECM artist, and I think that certainly yes. I mean, there are certain things like schools of thought. But there is. I mean, it's. I think somehow that things have changed, possibly because of the internet, that we have so much more access to different types of music, and I mean, I think I certainly learned a lot from YouTube, just looking at musicians. There's a very difference of listening to somebody like Manu Katché and then seeing him perform, and I learned a lot from that type of musician. Right. So yes, and I think that I just love. I have a very organic approach to this. I sort of think where anything goes, you gravitate to what somehow you gravitate to in that time.
Mm-hmm.
But so yes, I would say probably I can see what you mean, but I probably wouldn't have seen it in that way. And you know, funny enough, my record company's based in the UK.
Yeah, 33.
I was trying to sign with them for an album, for a project there for quite a while, and I was really excited when finally managed to find a vehicle for this album and the film that accompanies it. So you know, it's funny, and I can see what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, would you say it's a slight departure? It's just a question here for 33 Records and their usual sound. What do you think?
Well, they have a sub-label called 33 Extreme, which is an experimental avant-garde sort of sub-label. And so I think this is one of the projects that they are currently developing. It's trying to look for artists who might be multimedia artists, or artists who are trying to combine music and photography, music and performance. And I think it's quite exciting because it's sort of rising to the challenge of making music accessible in different ways, and giving artists also the freedom to develop their own artistic projects. And you know, Michael Nyman, I'm sure you know, is also, you know, he's based in Milan. He's a photographer, he's a filmmaker, and he uses filmmaking to influence his composing, and vice versa. So, you know, if you look at his, for example, his Instagram page, it's really exciting because he's somehow found a way to render everything that he does artistically coherent and also accessible. And so other artists are able to engage with his filmmaking and sort of use it to inspire what they're doing. So there's something very exciting happening there. And so I think that 33 Jazz Records have been trying to not so much follow the trend, but create a trend within the trend of you know, running an independent record company. And I think that's an incredible feat in itself. You know, and so there's I think that's what's really exciting. So it's just to come across people who are really trying to make a go of it, notwithstanding all of the obstacles they face.
And there are so many.
Well, sometimes those obstacles can be opportunities.
Sure.
I mean, we had Imogen Heath here, who I'm sure you also know. She was over in Milan for the Milan Jazz Festival called Jazz Week, and she gave a keynote speech at the Contemporary Art Museum. It's called Triennale, and so she was explaining how she composes, and she had her gloves, her special gloves that she uses, and it was really exciting because she was somehow, sort of demonstrating how she composes, how she performs, and it was just so infectious because she also pointed, that nobody has just been doing this, and she's somebody who's been such a pioneering person, in this field, and I think that's just so exciting because you think, well, with very little resources, people are making infinite use.
Yes.
And that's something which I think you really need to keep going.
Okay. So let me ask you then. So you've done 4 albums as well already. So those records were were they like different? Each record was different, or what were you doing before?
So I started my first album called We're Inside Out. Came out in 2006, I believe. On my own record label, and it was produced by a Norwegian Algerian musician called Malika Makuf Rasmussen, and that was very much the singer-songwriter based, because that was my initial sense of what I wanted to do, and so it's very much sort of storytelling in a sort of singer-songwriter format. But at the same time, around that time, I was discovering the world of dance, and so I started to compose music for dancers, and I got really interested in sort of soundscapes. And so my second album was, you could hear it's called Transito, which is a sort of moment of transformation really for me, and it sort of started to move away from the singer-songwriter structure and became more acoustic based, and I called it at the time, I liked to call it acoustic cinema because it was somehow it was almost like a soundtrack.
Right.
I had spent some time in upstate New York teaching at Cornell University, and I came across some incredible musicians, and I just ended up recording some of them, and I again just decided to explore that and not sort of fix it to a particular genre. And again, that was on my own label, and it was distributed by EOI, Norway. My third album was called Muerte Ballerinos, loosely translated as Death We Shall Dance, which was recorded while I was living in New York. And it was recorded with jazz musicians that I would just meet at parties or working in a music store, or one case, people who were busking on the street. And so I'm just going down to a recording studio and record with them. And it was really part of that sort of New York experience, just sort of seeing what would happen and see where the day takes you. And again, and that was on my own label. These were all albums that were available on iTunes, and I always kept the copyright. But after my fourth album, which was the album called Lost for Words, which was the concept album, I decided to withdraw my catalogue from iTunes because I somehow wanted to rethink my whole catalogue and rethink what I was prepared to make available. I love the fact that you can make what you do available online, but I sort of felt I'd like to also just kind of think about consolidating it. And I also have to say I became a bit disenchanted with the idea that people have forgotten how or what it's like to listen to CDs or to listen to live music.
Yeah.
Because as we all know, when you condense sort of a musical track into an MP3, you do lose quality.
Yeah, you do
lose a certain sense of depth. And I sort of felt a bit sad about this, because I sort of thought, well, I had spent so much time and thought and effort into composing these pieces, recording them, and with I was so lucky to meet some really great musicians and really generous musicians, who gave me their time, and we would have all this time to also speak about our own musical trajectories and questions and things we were obsessing about, and I learned so much from them. I felt it seemed to be so sad to sort of condense that into a very rigid technological format, and not to mention the royalty statements that arrive, and it just made you want to cry, really. So I sort of thought, I've been very lucky that I've been able to finance a lot of what I do myself through fundraising, through grant applications, through scholarships. Up until a couple of years ago, I was a lawyer, and I used to be a practicing lawyer. Yeah. I was a law professor for a while, so I had, the benefit of that, to be able to set up my own record label, to be able to finance my own projects, all the while being very, very aware and wanting to keep the copyright, and wanting to avoid standard record contracts, because I sort of really wanted to have a career that made sense of what I wanted to do. I was really, and I'm always very curious about experimenting, with learning, with practicing, and I wasn't so motivated by the entertainment side of things or the fame side of things. I was quite clear about that. I mean, I don't mean to criticise anybody else, just I was very aware of what I wanted out of my own artistic career, because as you so rightly said, I'm also a multimedia artist, and so I've used the kind of career I've had to be able to experiment and to really create different types of media.
And also you're the creative director of MA Studio Lab. Yes. So can you just tell us what is? So you're founding creative director. I take it that's your name, MA.
I use MA because I've been involved in so many different artistic projects, and so people would get confused. And then also there's my legal career, and so people would sort of ask me all the time, if there was a second person with the same name. And so I ended up saying, well, I'll just find everything off MA, just to be easier. MA Studio Lab grew out of, in fact, a time I was based at a research institute in Germany, and I was actually hired to be a law researcher and sort of churn out legal research papers and so on. But while I was there, I ended up creating a lot of sort of audio-visual, like an audio-visual archive of the work that was being done. And so I started to think about creating a brand, really, that would enable me to do works for hire for research institutes, for example, filming their conferences or filming their researchers talking about their research, designing an audiovisual package to mediate research protocols, and so I sort of decided to come up with that sort of brand, to be able to do that and to be able to do commercial work and use the commercial work as a way to experiment and the format, and then from that be able to finance my own artistic projects. And that was, for me, it also the brand created a sort of hub that I could use, and I could basically kind of bring third parties in for post-production purposes and sort of create a kind of a laboratory kind of atmosphere where people could just kind of create and see where it takes them. I think now research institutes, for example, do use cameras and film their conferences and so on. But I was more interested to sort of see how could you use the format of photographs and filmmaking and sound design to make something which was a bit different, not too different from it to be completely strange, but really somehow to conceive in a way that is somehow coherent with the research project. That's the idea behind MA Studio Lab. It was inspired by, and I created a sort of performance arts laboratory when I was living in New York called Artists at Large, and I used that as a kind of laboratory structure and sort of co-opted people in, so filmmakers, dancers, writers, sound engineers, and we would use the lab as a place to experiment, and then we would create. We'd have these workshops, and then we would create basically pieces during that workshop. So over a 3-hour period, we would have time to experiment, time to just somehow play around, and then we would have for the last 20 minutes we would have to create a piece, and that actually was somehow that inspired me to. Whatever I do, so to kind of keep a sort of collaborative approach going, and then create a hub that does that. And so MA Studio Lab also produced this EP because I really used a lot of people I had been working with to actually on this actual project. And so it's a kind of commitment to always connect people, to always be part of the community, which is ever evolving really, and that's the kind of that's the fun of it really.
Well, it all makes sense and fits into place with how the EP sounds as well, and the thought behind it. Well, that's good. Thanks for that. So just before I finish up this afternoon, obviously you're in Milan. I've interviewed one or two musicians coming out of Italy recently. And I interview a lot of artists from various parts of the continent. So what, in your opinion, what's the state of jazz in Milan and in Italy right now?
I think it's come to a bit of a standstill. I'm going to be slightly provocative. I was really quite. I was inspired by, for example, the Milan Jazz Festival that was here recently. And there was a mixture of people, and I sort of feel that there are some really great artists here, but there's sometimes maybe they haven't been able to get out of the Italian context or haven't been able to travel as much, and I think that a lot of the work that's been done, there's also a danger that it's a bit derivative, and it's, somebody who I probably you would have come across, Paolo Fresul, who's somebody who's broken away from that, and he's risked a lot. And I think that's the kind of person who it's great. He has his own jazz festival in Sardinia. He's somebody who I think really has created this incredible sort of microcosm within a landscape which is actually quite standard and quite rigid. And so, thank goodness for that. And I think that's something which I find really inspiring. It's interesting because also for me a lot of jazz is movement. When I used to live in New York, I used to play in the New York clubs. I used to play this club called the Shrine in Harlem, and it wasn't unexpected to find yourself playing and having to just stand up and dance. And I think that in fact that was sort of my crowning moment of glory when I was performing once. Here I was, as you say, British woman born in Bromley.
You're born in Bromley.
I was born in Bromley. I found myself performing in this this club in Harlem, and I was so happy to suddenly see people just get up and dance. And it's something which, because somehow it was just somehow everything somehow clicked. And for me, a lot of jazz is really, it's something that people want to move to. I mean, I think that there's something very infectious, and I think you mustn't forget it. That's why, in a way, I'm always trying to be careful to avoid being too cerebral, too clever about things, because I think, well, don't forget where for me, where it's coming from. I mean, I think that that's not necessarily the case for everybody. I think you find your own way to something. And for me, jazz was something that I, from very early on, moved to. And the type of dance that I discovered as an adult, which really sort of introduced me to the dance world, was jazz dance. And for me, there was just nothing better than to be in the music and understand as a musician different syncopated rhythms that you somehow can only discover by dancing to music. And so I sometimes despair at some of the concerts I've been to here that people just sit there and they all look a bit mobile. And I think, I love the way that I was saying in New York, people would comment. I remember singing one of my songs in this one club in New York, and somebody started to sing along with me, but he gave me different ideas. So he was kind of basically making fun of me because I think I wasn't really doing anything that extraordinary. And he was kind of saying, come on, don't waste my time. And so I started to improvise, and I think that's something which I love. And I think, just when you teach, the students make the class, and I think that as an audience, you have a certain responsibility to also engage with what's happening. And I think that's something I've noticed here is that there's some staticness of rigidness, but also maybe that's also just the challenges of smartphones, is that people spend so much time on their phones that they sort of somehow miss what's going on. And I mean, that's I'm a smartphone user as well, so I see how addicted they can become. But if you're going to go out and sit down and listen to live music, and when it works, there's nothing better. I mean, I'm absolutely clear about that. So
it could also so it could also be a perception thing. This is part of the problem that sometimes a lot of people think this is how you should act when you go to watch jazz.
Yeah.
But then obviously jazz didn't come from that kind of setting 100 years ago or more. I think that's where the confusion sets in.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's also a very very rigid approach to music. Maybe that's something that comes across on the continent, is that as a musician you have to somehow have done the conservatory approach, and you've gone through a conservatory, sort of go through all the different sort of stages, and sure, you can do that. Of course, you can do that. But what I loved, particularly when I was in the States, was just that it's really open. In the sense that if you have something to say, then say it and try and find the best way to say it. Certainly, and learn the standards, learn the rules. Learn that there are certain codes, but then really have the courage to try and make it. I mean, to play with that and to find your own voice within that. And I think that there is a change going on in Italy, and I think that's actually quite exciting. It's a change because of immigration. There's a change because just the political landscape and the political and economic landscape is changing. And so there are different cultures. We're bringing in different types of music. And one of the festivals in Milan, which is I find so exciting, is called Piano City. So you find all these pianos dotted around Milan, and people can just play, and they also have concerts. And you hear so many different styles and different types of musicians. And I think that's something that is really exciting. And you can hear it in some of the independent radio stations dotted around Italy, is that there are these radio stations who are really trying to find different types of approaches to music. And so that it is there, it's somehow just kind of needs to be provoked slightly more. And I think that you can just technically you can see it in music and art and dance and filmmaking and so on. So it is quite a conservative country still, which is a wonderful thing, and I think it's something I really do appreciate. But as with everything, it's great to sort of be more permeable and to be more susceptible to different outside influences. And so I think that and jazz is a place, I think, where that can happen. Jazz for me has always been a place where people can bring in different input some different ideas. I mean, the fact that Imogen Heap, who for me was an electronic music artist, was part of the Jazz Festival in Milan, which I initially thought, this is a bit strange, and then I thought, why not?
Yeah,
She's probably got something really interesting to say that could help all of us. And in the event, she's in the middle of developing a blockchain approach to artist management, to deal with all the bureaucracy for artists, and so she was talking about that as well. And I thought that's exactly what jazz artists need, is to find different ways to organise the bureaucratic side of what we do, and that's universal. I mean, that cuts across genres, and so anyway, there again, I think that's actually quite exciting. And I have to say, it's great for the keynote speech to be held by a woman, because there are so few women in music as a whole, but certainly in jazz. And I think that was really great to just be sitting there and really proud of somebody who's taking all these risks and who's somehow, created a community of collaborators around her who are helping her develop her ideas, who are excited about that and who are committing to that. And that's something which is infectious. I think as an artist, you look out for those experiences. And so if I was going to wish, if I could make a wish list for the jazz scene in Italy, is that it would go into that, go in that direction, really, is to look out for people who are going to just change, to be part of the change and inspire people to engage with that change and be part of it. And, even going around sort of schools and telling kids, just kind of experiment with music and don't feel that you have to be, made in a certain way as a musician. You have to listen to music, listen to jazz bands because you have to, find your own way. And I think that, something like, Marsalis, Winston Marsalis in New York, he's always pioneered the sort of masterclass approach to listening to jazz for children. And, they still have concerts just for kids. And I think that's just such a great initiative, is because it's like a palette. You should try different types of food, you should try different types of music, but also be aware that you have to develop your palette. You have to develop what you listen to and the way you listen to it. At least give people a choice, and then see, then they make their own choices, which is wonderful to be able to give people access to that.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. That's quite interesting. I mean, what I would say in summary is that people just have to remember that jazz is actually probably the most adaptable of all the musics out there, and people should remember that when they're sometimes getting too het up in what jazz is or what style of jazz is the most appropriate, blah 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 blah. Anyway, well, okay, that's a really interesting interview, and thanks for taking the time.
Well, thank you, and also thank you for not only including my music on your playlist, but also thank you for doing what you do, because you're part of that. Sort of a radio station to do that, and I think that's really the lifeblood for the listener, but also for artists and musicians. That it's just such a great way to aggregate all of the things that are happening that we wouldn't necessarily be able to explore or come across via on our own. And so I think that really is very important to underline. And thank you, because it's a vital resource for us.
Okay, no, thanks for that. I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, well, excellent. So, thanks for the interview, and enjoy the long weekend in Milan.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
The JLR interview series.